they had recently made the shift from being a product company to a platform, right? We had all of a sudden APIs and an app marketplace that we wanted a lot of startups to come build on top of, create joint value for our customers. And one great way to do that is to help, fund some of the emerging leaders in the ecosystem, not to incentivize them necessarily to build, but like to really support their growth and bring them closer to our customer base and our platform. So that's, I think, was the genesis of the fund, the frameworks that were coming out to build multi-agent systems. I immediately saw the opportunity here that, what was going to happen in the way that work is done is going to fundamentally transform. And at the time, there was a lot of hype around it, but clearly it wasn't effective at doing long multi-step tasks end to end without human intervention or like errors along the way. And I think from that point, early 2023 to now, we've seen a huge amount of innovation and change that has sort of like closed the gap from like hype to reality quite a bit.
Welcome back to Tank Talks. I'm your host, Matt Cohen, and we've got a super exciting guest on today's show with Adam Coccari, Managing Director at HubSpot Ventures. Adam's journey is pretty wild. He went from teaching 4th and 6th graders about math and tech before building one of the first educational apps on the App Store back when the iPhone was launched. Adam shares his journey diving deep into AI at Microsoft and the growth he saw there before jumping into his current role at HubSpot Ventures, where he is now focused on empowering small businesses with the power of AI. Finally, we discuss why Adam decided to recently join HubSpot Ventures as managing director and how his team balances building versus backing startups at the earliest stages. And we also ask Adam to share his vision for how AI agents will reshape small businesses' operations over the next decade. Now let's jump into the tank for this chat with Adam Coccari from HubSpot Ventures. Thanks for joining us in the tank today, Adam.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here.
I'm super excited to have you in the tank. Your journey is so fascinating around the tech and venture ecosystem over the years, but it's interesting. I read that you started your career as a 4th and 6th grade teacher, specializing in math and technology. I would love if you can give a little bit of background on that. What made you get into teaching in your early careers, and how did that kind of impact your life before moving into the tech world?
Great question. So I grew up in LA, went to college in upstate New York, and spent most of my time in college actually making music. I was in a band, I was doing a cappella performance, and my majored in psychology. So I didn't actually have a whole lot of intentional thinking about what I would do next in the workforce, and really spent some summers as a camp counselor. And that's really where I sort of discovered, hey, I really like working with kids. It's energizing, it's fun, get to mentor young people. And when I was graduating, it was 2008, right? Financial world was melting down. So I figured, hey, what should I do? I know I like working with kids. Applied to be a teacher, and luckily got a job back home in the Pacific Palisades, where I went and started as a kind of 4th grade teacher, and quickly in the classroom sort of gravitated towards math instruction. So sort of became a specialist at the school in teaching math to both 4th and 6th graders, and then also really like all the subjects in school, and really enjoyed it. I mean, I can't express fully in words like how trying and difficult sometimes it is being as a teacher, especially learning on the fly because I had no formal education. But you pick up so many lessons around just like altering your communication style for different types of people and different types of learners, how parents and their parenting style affects kids and how they turn out, like helping kids build resilience, all these things that didn't really feel like they would translate into the workforce, but really have, like as a manager, a lot of these same skills and the patience and coaching, like really translated honestly into sort of working in a corporate context. But how I got into entrepreneurship was really just like in the classroom, saw my kids struggling with math practice. At the time, state of the art was like, go home and, practice your times tables on flashcards. And, kids hated it. I was begging the parents to go home and help them learn. And it was just like miserable. And I was a big gamer growing up, and I saw my kids were, at home playing Minecraft and Halo and all these things. And I just figured, like, why isn't there a way to make math learning as fun as playing, a tier 1 video game? And that was really where like my product idea was born from. The iPad had just been released, App Store had just come out, and when I went to look for apps on the App Store to help the kids learn math, they were all terrible. They were basically just flashcards translated into an app context. So I sort of said, like, okay, let's design a real fun experience where to get through the game, you have to learn and solve math facts. And that's sort of was the genesis of Math Evolve. It was a top-down shooter where you fly around fighting enemies and leveling up as you're solving math equations real time. So you have to kind of like do mental math while balancing other things. And it's just actually a great way to learn. It's fun, and was able to sort of take it end to end from an idea to a live product on the App Store. It was still pretty early on in those years, so I was able to get featured by Apple, had lots of use in the home and classroom around the world. And for me, that's what lit a passion for building software and wanting to kind of pursue a career around entrepreneurship full time, and left to go to business school, University of Michigan. And that was kind of what started my career in technology.
I love that. I mean, there's a couple of threads I want to pull on there. One is like the thing about how trying to explain to like fourth and sixth graders, like what math concepts are or something is just so relevant, because sometimes when we speak to founders or like young entrepreneurs, we have to not dumb it down, but speak their language while trying to get across our message of like what actually is trying to be the outcome. And I do that all the time with my team now. And that's a really good lesson. I mean, I have 2 young kids, and trying to speak to them is also very challenging sometimes. But the other thing too about the math part and the English part, everyone's trying to avoid screen times. I got young kids, and I've been pushing hard every night to go on education.com and do math and English reading with my daughter. And it's not screen time. It's full learning. And I just see the progress and the progression that happens with it. But for you had no formal training at all in building any product. Did you just there wasn't Cursor back then? There wasn't really any of these like low code tools. How did you do it?
That's a great question. I mean, for me, I think I've always been like just like a builder and someone that naturally loved to create and dream stuff. So for me, it started on a notepad, right? It was like I was drawing and sketching what a UI of a video game would look like. I played games my whole life, so I think I had a good sense of like what would be fun, and then really just wrote a product document, define what I wanted, and then sent it out to dev shops around the world on like the kind of task, Elance, so what is now Elance, and found a game development studio in Bogota, Colombia, that I hired to build it. Gave them basically my life savings. That my point. My parents thought I was crazy. Absolutely, like tried to dissuade me from doing it. And luckily, the art teacher at my school was a really creative guy, a great illustrator. So he did all the drawings. We hand painted, hand drew all the characters and the artwork that we gave to them, and they turned it into a video game over 12 months. And I was the PM of the project, did all the marketing, built the website. It was a lot done through Twitter and Facebook groups at the time. And that's how we got early traction.
And where did it end up at the end of the day before we jump into
it was good lesson on timing. Honestly, we launched right before in-app purchases became a thing. So I don't know if you remember those days, like apps were $1 or $2. And so I got a lot of people to pay me $2, but you didn't get their email and you had no way to remarket or remonetize the thing. So it was sort of like poor timing, and that we got a lot of sales, but like it was really hard to kind of build a sustaining and recurring business after that. So I just left it on the App Store. It was a paid app for a long time, actually 11 years on the App Store. It just came down last year.
Wow.
Because it was like I was like so far out of compliance from the updates. But
timing, that's such an interesting thing on timing though, really is. Like you did not control, obviously, the destiny of this company, but it could have been controlled by the other factors at play. Like in-app purchases could have changed your life. You could have become a developer as well.
Yeah. Because a year later, all the apps that were doing that were releasing like levels, content packs, and you could like monetize in a different way. It was just really hard in the school context to get a kid or a teacher to pay more than like $2.
And that's so interesting about the timing thing, because we're seeing this now in SaaS, which is like the replatforming of 2018, 2019 businesses that need to catch up to AI versus 2023, first generation AI built tools, and like how they're thinking about it. It's like that timing, if you were to have these tools available today when you started building your B2B SaaS app in 2018 would have been so different. Right.
Exactly. And just the updates, right? Like to pay for an update meant like spinning up a dev team and spending a lot of money, where now it's like, you could do this on the fly alone.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I'm very excited to see the educational apps that people now will create with all these tools. I think there's a huge opening for personalized learning now with large language models. That's going to be a completely new paradigm for.
Well, we'll talk about that after, but I want to get to your move after education, where you joined Microsoft as a product manager intern in the cloud and AI division, early on, when cloud and AI were really just kind of getting going. What were some of those lessons learned and insights from working in cloud before really cloud and AI became a thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So again, like I think I got really lucky. Honestly, it was summer of 2013. I went to intern at Microsoft. Ballmer was still in charge, and everybody in my MBA program was like, "Why are you going to Microsoft?
They're
It's like
dead.
sleepy, they're dead." Yeah, it was kind of like the consensus view at that time. And they put me in this server group, and they call it server and tools. Like as exciting as it could be, coming from like consumer technology, and I didn't know anything, right? So I was reading about SQL databases and sort of like system admin stuff. And it was just like all completely new to me. So for one, it was just like learning the language of enterprise software and the different layers of the stack, right? At the time, there was both on-prem systems and like now native, people were basically shifting their IT to AWS. Azure was a new service to do the similar thing, but it was very much just like lift and shift what was happening in IT into the cloud context. And then all the sort of like pieces on top of that, business intelligence and a lot of like workloads for business apps. And so that was just a great learning. And then when I got in there full time, my first project was actually to help optimize their sort of marketing and sales funnel. So kind of come full circle now. It's really helpful what I'm doing at HubSpot. I was pulling data out of Marketo, out of Salesforce, out of our sort of like online systems and ads to try to piece together like what's the customer journey, how do we measure ROI, and doing like early machine learning prediction models in there. So for me, it was just a great also lesson of like, what is enterprise sales? What are the things that sort of move people to different considerations, from hitting a website to I want to try Azure to now I got somebody calling me to sell. So I was really like understanding the process of B2B sales and the data that goes along with that has been just so immensely valuable forever. And at that time, AWS was like obviously like the standard, and it was even really my entire time at Microsoft. And so what I got to see was like how do you then kind of take the different services that you need to build applications and sort of build machine learning and turn them into sort of new, more native cloud services that would cause people to shift from what they were doing to sort of a cloud native stack. And that was a really interesting time as people like replatformed, as you said.
How much customer interaction did you have? Did they put you as an intern to get those conversations out of them?
Yeah.
Like, how did you pull those insights out? There wasn't like a gong like recording you could listen to.
No, for me, it was all data. So I was working just with our internal teams. I had like a developer team that was doing all the analysis, building dashboards, building SQL models. And like, again, it really was like learning on the fly, but a lot of my experience in building the app was kind of placed in sort of running the PM role there.
Well, how did the sort of transition into, Microsoft's venture arm though happen?
Yeah,
it's such a great transition to M12.
Yeah, I was lucky. It was, they basically started the fund from scratch. There was a thing called Microsoft Ventures, but a guy who has become a mentor and friend came over from Qualcomm Ventures named Nagraj Kashyap.
Of course.
And our current head of business development at the time, Peggy Johnson, said, we need a venture fund that's going to be sort of a independent, financially focused fund that will both help drive awareness of what Microsoft's doing and sort of the cutting edge, and be a little bit of like a halo for innovation. At the time, startups did not consider Azure. So part of it was like, how do we build an ecosystem? How do we make, get like a toehold in Silicon Valley and like innovative startup hubs around the world? Let's start a venture fund. So Nagraj came over, hired a few people, and I was like probably the sixth team member to join the team because they wanted someone that knew Microsoft, knew startups, and I had done some venture work at Ross in my MBA program. So it was just like a good fit of all the things I had done. And my initial role was to work with the portfolio companies to help them work with Microsoft, do co-marketing, do integrations. So we called it portfolio development, and I was the first member of that team. And over 6 years, grew that team to 6 people, a portfolio of 120 companies we were supporting, and got to work with some amazing founders on partnerships and products.
So they did want to set it up truly independent, obviously.
Yes.
When Qualcomm, maybe when they set up theirs, was not truly independent.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that was great because he came over with 10 or 20 years of learning of like, what are all the pitfalls of corporate venture? And I think, quickly to me, I think it's like, being too tied to the company's strategy and what they're looking for, and not sort of like using signals of the market and customers to what you should be investing in. 2, it's like being slow in decision-making and not being able to like, move at the pace of venture and founders. And 3, having like misaligned incentives. And like a big part of solving all that is to be financially oriented and measure yourself on the returns of the company and not be tied to the strategy of Microsoft. So at least in those initially like 5-6 years, that was really how we were operating. And it was like running a venture fund inside of the company just using the balance sheet.
And now I think they rebranded to M12 in 2018. Why did they rebrand it?
It was a couple of reasons. I think one was to create a little bit of more of that independent brand and distance from Microsoft proper. Two, there was a little bit of a goal for us to have our own website, and the CMO at the time didn't love that. So like the sort of Mexican standoff or whatever ended up in us having our own brand and our kind of name change to M12 at that time.
Is it just like copying off like the Andreessen A16Z sort of idea?
It was like lots of iterations. The party line was there was 12 letters in the word entrepreneur, and
right. That's what I saw. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, cool. So I mean, listen, you worked there in the M12 group, which was amazing, and then you got to see like this sort of changing of the guard and how obviously things were going to change around all corporate venture, right? Yeah. So you got this opportunity to join HubSpot Ventures. Yeah. What was the initial strategy with HubSpot Ventures early on? Yeah. And, I believe Salesforce Ventures was an early investor in HubSpot, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
So they had their own venture arm, and then HubSpot Ventures had their venture arm. Yeah. When you joined, what was the strategy?
When I joined HubSpot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just joined HubSpot in October. So pretty new here. Going back to like the genesis of HubSpot Ventures, 5-6 years ago, I think it was very similar to some of the thinking of M12 and Salesforce Ventures in their early days of like, they had recently made the shift from being a product company to a platform, right? We had all of a sudden APIs and an app marketplace that we wanted a lot of startups to come build on top of, create joint value for our customers. And one great way to do that is to help, fund some of the emerging leaders in the ecosystem, not to incentivize them necessarily to build, but like to really support their growth and bring them closer to our customer base and our platform. So that's, I think, was the genesis of the fund. And, there's a lot of ecosystem investing in those early years. If you look at the early portfolio companies, it's like highly tied to sort of like the partner ecosystem and the areas that Salesforce, that HubSpot was focused on at the time. And as that evolved and we had more and more success investing, I think that kind of creates a little bit more latitude to invest outside the core, invest a little bit earlier in things that are adjacent to our platform. And in that time, the platform has really expanded. Now, HubSpot serves companies of sizes going from 5 employees up to 2,000 and beyond. And we have products across content, service, support, CRM, and marketing automation. So it's really a broad set of spaces that we can invest in. So what got me excited to come on was, okay, now what does this next wave of HubSpot Ventures look like? And how do we take the fund from a really strong position? We have 60 portfolio companies, great history and great set of founders, to being like an even more sort of long-term oriented, independent, and kind of world-class corporate venture fund, taking all the lessons I had from my time at Microsoft and Intuit.
Corporate venture has changed so much since when you entered in, obviously, to where, now HubSpot Ventures is, to now where we're seeing players like NVIDIA and OpenAI and Anthropic's Anthology Fund playing. And so we had Vili Ilchev on the podcast the other week, and he came from Salesforce Ventures in the early days. Yeah. And I joked and said, like, Salesforce Ventures could give a bunch of free licenses away as like the new version of credits that you're seeing now with like NVIDIA or Amazon, but it's just not the same ROI, immediate ROI to those portfolio companies. Yeah. Yeah. So how are you thinking the game on the field is changing today, where the NVIDIAs of the world or the AWSs of the world, yes, they have corporate venture arms, but they also have corporate credits basically that they can offer, and how you guys can compete if it is going to be competition between corporate venture players?
Yeah. A couple of questions in there. I think one, corporate venture in if you boil it down, shouldn't really be too different if it's done well than any venture program, or any like investor, which is like you're there to help the founder grow and help them in any way that really makes sense. You can provide unique value. And I think every investor, whether that be like a financial fund or a corporate venture, has to have a perspective like where can they add unique value and how can they sort of support that founder. And it's different from company to company. So I really try to think about every person I meet is like, what is the intersection for what they want to do in their vision, and like what we can provide as a company and what I can personally provide from my expertise and knowledge. And so, if you think about why the reason I like corporate venture is the avenues for providing value and support. It's just very different. So it's like I see a complementary with you guys, and that's why I love working with VC partners, because we can sort of like together provide like a great set of benefits where like you have lots of expertise and can really help on talent, on sort of like thinking through company strategy, which we help with as well. But like most of our value is going to come in areas of like a brand recognition, having someone like HubSpot on the cap table, and like our founders, Brian, Dharmesh, like getting involved and sharing more about the company. Two is helping with those integrations and the ecosystem work they want to do with get in front of our customers, providing like insight on where the market's going, what we're building, so they can find like what's the complementary thing we can build. Like we can give them a little bit of a view behind the scenes on where we're going, so they can sort of build complementary solutions. And there is those like standard benefits. Like we do give discounts on HubSpot, but I see that as like table stakes. Like that's just the icing on top. I think it's the other things that founders are really looking for when they come to corporate venture. And I see it as like not competitive. Like we work even with Salesforce Ventures in some cases, but like definitely other corporate funds, because we're not leading deals. They're typically not either. So we can sort of like fit alongside others on the cap table and then find unique ways to help.
That makes a lot of sense. Before getting to some of the vertical SaaS plays out there and how the world is changing, I got to ask, did you know anything about chat.com and Dharmesh's play there? Because that must have been a great Monday meeting conversation.
That was. No, he's a very interesting and clearly like has so much foresight. And his online personality and the way he kind of gives access to his thoughts on LinkedIn is so unique. But we find out a lot through that same channel along with everybody else.
So funny.
So I'm often catching up with Dharmesh and his latest on LinkedIn as well. But do get the benefit of getting to work with him on the investments we make and get his perspective on the company.
Yeah. So just for our listeners who maybe are not aware, HubSpot co-founder and CTO Dharmesh Shah recently revealed back in September, I think, or something last year, that he had sold the domain chat.com to OpenAI for over reported 15 million US, making one of the largest domain sales in recent years. And he announced that he acquired it, chat.com, in 2023. And it was going to be like a prime address for conversational AI is what he thought about it. And he was absolutely right. So very kudos to him. I know that wasn't probably part of your playbook and what you're supposed to be focusing on, but let's get into what you do focus on, which is you're focusing on AI agents, and for SMBs, obviously, is a space that HubSpot knows well. Tell me where you think, we are sitting right now in the application versus like the tooling, and how you guys are thinking about vertical versus horizontal applications today, where we are, maybe a year from now and maybe a few more years from now, if they're all going to still exist.
Yeah. Great questions. So when I started to first see the early experiments around AI agents, maybe like early 2023, and so the frameworks that were coming out to build multi-agent systems, I immediately saw the opportunity here that what was going to happen in the way that work is done is going to fundamentally transform. And at the time, there was a lot of hype around it, but clearly it wasn't effective at doing long multi-step tasks end to end without human intervention or like errors along the way. And I think from that point, early 2023 to now, we've seen a huge amount of innovation and change that has sort of like closed the gap from like hype to reality quite a bit. Some of the biggest ones, obviously, reasoning models to have more succinct multi-step planning, just actually at the model layer. One, two, multimodal input that works much better. So you can like these models can actually see what's happening on screen, operate mouses and browsers in a much like more effective way. Adding more effective multi-agent systems with longer running memory. And I think the just the overall sort of like accuracy level of these models as they're kind of carrying out multiple steps, I think is just like taken a huge step function change in that time. So, where a lot of the early experiments were in things like, marketing and sales, like the outbound SDRs, sort of like copywriting and marketing, makes sense. The bar is sort of like a little bit lower and you can have a little bit, more hallucination and more issues. Like now I'm really starting to see these things work in functions that are a lot more, I think where people thought it was going to take longer to get to that, but I always had conviction on. So some of the ones I'm really excited about right now are in spaces like bookkeeping, accounts receivable, financial research and analysis of companies. So a lot of the back office function stuff, I think, is really starting to work with AI agents. And to me, that it's just going to provide so much leverage to business owners and small business operators, including founders, as these tools get better and better. So that's a lot of what we're looking at today is application layers and the use of AI agents or agentic applications to either take on functional tasks within a company, whether that be marketing or back office functions like the accounting piece I just mentioned, or some of the horizontal components that you would need to like build that and like take it to market. Because like we are going to be continuing to build agents ourselves, and we can be a first and best customer and partner for some of these companies. But if I had to ask like where am I more excited, I'm actually more excited in the application layer and how this stuff is actually being brought to the hands of small business owners to actually take and automate work end to end.
Yeah, because if I look at your bets that you made like in 2023, 2024, it seems like before you were able to get conviction on specific apps, you had to play the infrastructure bets, which is like 11x, 12 labs, Tofu, 11 labs, and obviously now you're out on the application side of Koala. So why make the switch to more niche down tools, applications, like a dentist scheduling tool, for example, when you're still figuring out exactly how the horizontal players, the infrastructure players, are figuring out the best ones to go after? Are you not worried that some of these these horizontal players will also start to add on their own marketplace of tools that will go after specific niche verticals?
I mean, I think for the biggest app categories, they will. I mean, like Sam was talking this week about creating a coding agent.
Right.
Like I think that's going to happen. But we all have seen this already. Like the gap between a model and a finished product for a small business owner or like a founder is immense. Like the just to wrap a workflow around something and make it like great for somebody that hasn't spent all their life building AI tools or isn't super technical is a real skill. And I think that's where a lot of the value is going to be created is like, the models will keep getting better underneath. So if you're a founder, if you build a great end user application using like, the cutting edge tools, but you make it super user friendly and an agentic service for, let's say, marketing.
Dentists or marketing. Yeah.
Right. Then like you can just continually swap out the models on the back end and benefit from all that innovation, but create something that a business owner can immediately get value out of and is willing to charge for because it's saving them money or getting them more customers. And like that, I think is really where so much value is going to happen. Is OpenAI going to go make something for dentists? No, I don't. I think that's too small of an opportunity for them, and they have way too much to go do on the core innovation level. And I think that if you step back, there is a window here where I think a lot of these niches are going to be filled. And that's why I think there's like such a shift to early stage investing right now, because I think just speed of execution and getting sort of like the first wave of business owners adopting these things, understanding what the workflows are and tuning these agent systems to work for them is going to happen in the next year or two. And I think you're going to see a lot of companies built. And once you get that, then I think there's a lot of compounding value, understanding how humans are sort of interacting with your tool. So that's why like we're looking at a lot of very early stage companies in these long tail verticals that serve our SMB.
Yeah, I kind of liking it to like the Chrome extension rush, right? And everybody was pushing out Chrome extensions, and that's obviously built off of Chrome. But the difference here is you don't need as much capital to get going, and therefore you can build a lot more sustainable businesses, but they're just very niche down. So then backtracking to the next sort of question is what happens to Series A and Series B sort of thinking? It's like, yes, there's still going to be capital to grow marketing and stuff like that, but you're not going to be growing as efficiently as you were in the early days. So what does that do for these larger venture asset classes when the applications themselves can reach 10 million plus with only, 5 million less of funding?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think it's actually creating a lot of like concern for these larger multi-stage funds, to be candid. Like I think that you're already seeing people trying to give a lot of capital to founders at pre-seed and seed because they are seeing this dynamic that they may not need a big Series B.
Just go look at the recent YC batch. Like every single round was like 5 to 10 million.
Yeah, because I think the thinking is, hey, if it starts to really work, it might be the last big round they ever take. Like I don't believe we're going to see like the 3-person companies hit $1 billion revenue.
Agreed.
I think we're going to need a lot of people, and there's a lot of creativity that goes into building a great business. But the overall trend is less capital, more efficiency, and that means invest earlier. And I think that's the trend you're seeing.
Right. So I want to talk about sort of the hybrid
Yeah.
workforce that you guys envision, I think, at HubSpot, which is blending these human experts with AI tools alongside of it.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about that, and where some of these initial like experimental ARR kind of
Yeah.
pilots
Yeah.
still need to be involved? We had an event the other day, and one of the founders said, "I think we're going back to briefcase sales motions again, where people are going to be back out there,
Yeah. I think
carrying around their
yeah.
briefcases
Yeah.
around."
Yeah.
But AI tools will do all the preliminary and post-sale work.
Yes. Yeah, I think overall we're big believers in AI augmenting humans, and especially in like enterprise sales functions. I think that's going to be the case for a long time, and maybe forever. I think in these high value business deals, I do think that in terms of some of the more like workflow oriented things, like the ones I was just mentioning, like dentist scheduling or accounts receivable, I think a lot of it is building trust initially. So a lot of the models we're seeing is like initially the agents are creating things, and then the human kind of comes into review and approve. Like, yes, send that message out, go do that task. And as they get comfort, okay, I've approved the last 50 without editing. Well, like then it's an easier thing to like, let's switch it on autopilot. So I think a lot of it is kind of both building the trust for the user, and then that sort of feedback loop also gives the model a great sense of like, okay, how do I go from 95% accurate to almost 99%, and then you can just turn it on to autopilot. So I think we're going to see that happen quickly in a lot of the more sort of routine and back office.
Yeah, right.
And it's
Okay.
happening. Yeah.
The question I also wonder is, you guys have so much information inside HubSpot.
Yeah.
You can see a lot of activity happening around the ecosystem. Yeah. How much can you learn internally before you go out to the market to find applications? Or are you taking a lot more from the external market, learning and then seeing what that can do to help, obviously, the team inside HubSpot? Like, do you come with a prepared mind to a lot of this stuff? Yeah. Or are you learning and then going back and learning internally afterwards?
It's a great question. It's definitely both. So I would say on the internal side, what we get to really leverage that's an advantage is one is due diligence. So, if I'm talking to somebody that's building an advertising tool or something for optimizing like paid media, I'll immediately have them come meet our CMO or our digital ads team, get feedback hands-on, like, could this move the needle for us or our customers? So like that's an immense value. Two, we have all the data from our marketplace. We see what people are downloading, integrating with HubSpot. So you can kind of quickly see if some things are really catching fire in that ecosystem, which is a great advantage. And just getting to learn from, they're always like our product managers are so customer oriented, doing customer interviews, hearing customer insights. So we can sort of glean understanding of where there is pain points among our customers, or where there's gaps on HubSpot where like a partner or a startup could easily fill that. So that's all great signals for us of where to look and where we think there's, opportunity for partnerships. Because that's really like the end of the day what I'm looking at. I'd love to invest and then have that company be able to go to market with HubSpot. On the external side, like we do spend a lot of time talking to founders, talking to other VCs, because we want to also be that sensing signal for HubSpot, right? It can't be navel gazing. I think that's sort of the trap with corporate venture. So we should really be bringing signal from the early stage startups back to us as well. Of like, what's happening? Where are we seeing success out in the market, and where should we lean in from a partnership perspective?
It's so interesting. Like, if you look at the top apps or most frequently downloaded apps on HubSpot Marketplace, it's the things you would think, right? It's Zoom, it's Slack, it's Calendly, it's Typeform, it's Stripe. But those ones are obviously well gone past where you guys would take a look at. So where is that sort of inflection point that people start to get noticed? Give us some inside baseball on what a founder who's building inside the HubSpot Marketplace should aim for.
Yeah. To the actual numbers, I don't know if I can share that, but I think, a lot of it's velocity, right? Like, okay. I'll tell you one tool that I really like and use often. You might have tried it, is Granola.
Yeah.
Use it, right?
People love it.
That's one I feel like is more on the like the VC and founder like circuit. A lot of people are using it, but like that, like I sort of found out about that from other founders, but I've also watched sort of like the velocity of that company in the ecosystem, and just all the note taker apps in general. Like there's a few others. Read AI is a really great new one that's getting a lot of steam. Fathom gets a lot, is doing really well in the ecosystem. So like we're just seeing like as the capability of those note taking systems and how it kind of connects got better and better, like the volume and the overall like presence across our ecosystem grew dramatically. And that was like for me a really interesting signal. You see like, okay, this went from being something like a few people were using to like almost everybody. And also to kind of compare across like how fast they're being adopted across the ecosystem.
But that's an interesting, like granola.ai is what you're referring to. It's got a lot of news or kind of social media buzz. They raised $20 million in what was reported October 24 of 20 million from Spark Capital, Lightspeed, and others. And so that's a great example. Like that may be the last round they need to get this business really flying. So hopefully you find these things before.
So miss that one. And I think it's a good say. It's like, there's so many great partners in this category where like maybe choosing one isn't the right choice for us. But I think, you can sort of imagine that into other partner categories where we could sort of like get in early and choose what we think is the best product. And sort of,
okay. Yeah. So let's talk about what the due diligence and decision-making looks like from HubSpot Ventures. Like what is so important for you at HubSpot, besides obviously getting like some of the product buy-in and maybe some of the, overall industry use data on how HubSpot can maybe benefit from this? Like, what do you want to see in a team?
Well, I mean, honestly, those two things you mentioned are less important for us as we're looking at this more from the kind of financial lens. To me, right now, I think having in the categories we talked about, I think having sort of unique insight into an industry or what really is going to work within a workflow is so important. Because if you're building these agents to go like automate things end to end, obviously, like there's two things. You can either go interview hundreds of people, understand like what their workflow is and how do we automate this, or you're coming from that industry, you're coming from those pain points. So like, to me, that's huge. Have they done the work either in deep customer research or they're coming from that industry where they know what's going to really do it, be a 10x better solution with AI? I think just resilience and adaptability right now is everything. Like the world is changing so fast. So like founders today, I think have to have both the ambition and long-term vision, but to be able to like change almost on a week-to-week basis on what's happening in the technology platforms that are changing around them. So I think adaptability and sort of unique insights on an industry are the two things I'm really looking for in teams.
I think one founder recently who's seen a lot of momentum in our portfolio was so self-aware that first mover advantage is not final mover advantage. And this space, especially in like a lot of the AI tooling systems, like he knows he's got a great lead right now, but he can't rest on that. And I think a lot of founders rested on that for too long in prior years, where now there's so many tools. Like people are scared of the next dev day drop from OpenAI or from as they should be. You could be displaced. Like think about the first tools that we saw in 2023, that were coming out as wrappers basically. And they've been fully displaced. And like something might displace a cursor potentially. I mean, they've got a huge advantage right now, but again, like those are the ways in which things are being changed so quickly.
Agreed.
What other things do you guys look for? Go ahead.
I mean, obviously, like at seed and Series A, a lot of it is metric driven. I think like the overall efficiency and like gross dollar retention to me are like two of the biggest factors. Or like I would love to have seen your revenue be at least equal to, if not higher than the amount you've raised or burned in cumulatively. I think now with the way companies are built, like that should be like a default bar. And then with all the sort of experimental revenue you're talking about, I think looking at retention, if you have a year or two of data, I think is like the biggest signal. If it's like below 80%, I think it's pretty concerning that a lot of it's just sort of tire kicking.
I'll be honest with you though, Adam, like with the speed of these rounds happening, the ERR, experimental recurring revenue versus ARR, is so far apart that you cannot annualize the experimental POC 3-month, data because it hasn't gone through a recurring cycle yet.
Yeah, I know. I don't know about you. Like I'm finding myself sort of bimodally investing. It's like either truly almost like pre-launch, pre-product, I'm betting on the founder they're going to do this, or after there's a couple of years of data. I think that like that in between phase is a lot of fog of war right now. So that's sort of how we've been shaken out. It's like a lot of pre-seed rounds or Series A's and B's.
So I have a question for you that we heard recently that people think is an advantage versus a disadvantage, which is a lot of these product-led growth products like a granola, for example, who have not cracked enterprise are going to have a better chance of sustaining themselves into an enterprise sale versus somebody who starts with selling to enterprise on a 6-month, sales process and then a 1-year contract because they've been so battle tested on those quick, fast sale / churn customers that they're going to be a better chance. Like, is that your view as well? Given that HubSpot does play, SMB-ish, that like they are better to service the enterprise eventually versus some of these ones who just come out trying to sell to enterprise?
I do think so. Yeah. I think it's also like structural. I think it's, if you're making money selling like, 50 to a few $100 subscriptions and you've built a great business doing that, it's way easier than to layer on a sales force and enterprise sales motion. And you can invest the resources also in like going just to collect all the customers. Like you mentioned granola. We have lots of granola users inside of HubSpot. I don't think it's an enterprise contract. Like they'll be primed to do that when they really want to. And it's way harder for a company that has like high paying AEs to then say, hey, go take those expensive resources and go sell to small businesses, or like figure out the growth loop at lower on. I think it's way more difficult.
Yeah, it's true. The AEs are like, what's my quota and what's my OT on that? I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah.
So
and that's the journey we're on as a company, to be candid. Like we're still on that path at HubSpot.
Exactly. A lot of people are trying to figure that out now. I want to switch gears on sort of your advice and insights around people looking to join maybe a corporate venture arm or maybe some early stage investing groups. Like, what is your thoughts around how people should think about whether or not joining a corporate venture arm versus a traditional venture fund is best bet for them? And how are the evolutions of your career change between the two?
It's a great question. I mean, biggest difference is, let's just be like upfront about it. I think, you have to fundraise from LPs. Like that's a huge difference in terms of like time allocation.
Oh, I know.
Like the matter in terms of like how you're building portfolio and allocating your time. The other one, of course, is like financial upside can be quite different. We are just salaried employees and, have bonus and equity and stuff, but like there's no carried interest component to what we do. So I think like just being upfront about that when people are talking to corporate venture, like I'm hiring now, it's like, I think it's a really important distinction. I think if you're building your own fund, especially like there's potential for huge returns if you really knock it out of the park. I think, but there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of difficulty in fundraising, which I'm sure you can you talk about often out here. And I think so when I think about what I love about corporate ventures, one, there is like some of this long-term view and stability, especially like now we still have our founders in place. Like they're looking at this from a 10, 15-year horizon, and we're investing off the balance sheet to kind of like continue to build the ecosystem around HubSpot and can take that long-term view without the pressure of near-term DPI or showing like markups in sort of incremental phases, which is great for thinking long-term and making investments. I think you have to also enjoy a little bit of the, how do I navigate this big company to add value to entrepreneurs? And that can be a little bit slow, right? Like you have to be able to like work through the big company pace sometimes, but it's fun because there are so many resources to draw on. So if you are creative, if you like to connect with people, if you have like a business development sort of partnership mind, as well as enjoy investing, I think CVC can be a great fit. And that for me, that's why I've loved it. I think it combines the things I love about working with founders and helping them through like the resources we have at the company. I learned when I tried to start my own pre-seed fund, like fundraising, probably not for me, not something I really was good at or enjoyed. So that was sort of like a good lesson. And I've really enjoyed sort of like building these funds inside of a corporate environment. It sort of blends the things I love about building companies and being small team. We have 3 people today, with sort of the platform of a larger business.
That's a great answer. And truly, I appreciate the honesty. The word corporate is still in corporate VC for a reason, right? There's the pros and the cons that come with it. And you just got to know what's right for you in your stage of life. Yeah. What does post-investment onboarding into the HubSpot Ventures group feel like for a founder? Like, is there an onboarding? Do you get a lot of access, or is it just sort of you leave them alone and they come to you when they need help?
I think we try to match it to the phase and what they're looking for. Some of the typical stuff we try to do is we get them on the discounts if they're looking for access to specific support as well on what they're doing with HubSpot. That's like table stakes. A lot of the cool stuff we can do is if they're building an integration or a new joint product experience, we can bring solution architects, we can bring our product leaders that are running those businesses to share and collaborate on like what this should be, what they're doing. So we'll often have them meet some of our senior leadership or the product teams that are like in their space, and then connect them with like architects to do the integration and app marketplace listing. So that's usually like a starting point, because from there, that's when you can get to the more interesting stuff on sort of joint marketing, co-marketing. We're going to have our big conference in San Francisco this year for the first time. It's called Inbound, and it'll be like our user conference. So we're looking to plug our companies into speaking sessions, going to have a lot of like demos for them and try to give them a lot of exposure within the company. So a lot of it is thinking through like, what are the big moments and how can we get them to where they want to be? But it's different for every company. Like you mentioned, 12 Labs, for instance, like that is more something that we would use. So the motion there is how do we get them in front of our Content Hub team that are building video tools and video editing stuff in HubSpot so we can be a customer.
Right.
And sometimes it's others, it's like they want to build an embedded technology that we would sort of like put inside of our products that our end customers use. So it's like finding the people that are looking and working on those projects and connecting them. So it's really custom. But there's some base level things, and that's run by one person on my team named Jen. She's fantastic. And I'm sure that part of the team will grow over time.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the conference, especially getting them in front of all the other players and partners and customers is huge for value for a lot of startups as well. I was doing some research and I got to say, I don't see a lot of M&A activity out of the HubSpot side. I think the most recent one I found was The Hustle, which is obviously an acquisition they made to expand their media company.
There's been some more recent ones.
There's been some more recent ones?
Yeah. The two big ones last year were Clearbit.
Right. That was huge.
Now Breeze Intelligence and run by the founder, Matt Sorensen. And then Cashflow, which is now going to be and the founder there, Sarika, is running our Commerce Hub product group. And that's all of our sort of quote to cash and payment enabled invoicing products. So those are actually two of the larger acquisitions in HubSpot's history, and we're both last year.
Yeah, Clearbit was a fantastic one. I think the question I would ask then is, how should founders think about when they do work with HubSpot? Is that a conversation that happens? We have a lot of corporate venture arms that we work with in our portfolio companies, Google, Amazon, Thomson Reuters, Salesforce Ventures, and so on. It definitely is a conversation that comes up. Right. How does that sort of work on your side?
Yeah, it's a great question. First thing I say, it's not an intentional part of the strategy. Like we are not investing to build M&A pipeline. We are part of the larger corporate development team, though. My boss, Brandon, he's primarily focused on M&A, and they've got a set of folks to do that. So we're all in one larger team. So, what it's more looks like is coming to a line perspective on like what categories are potential good M&A categories, where should we be looking for investment and partnership, and trying not to actually clash there. Like I don't want to go invest in a founder and then acquire their competitor a year later. Like that's not good for anyone, really. So trying to like have a little bit of foresight on where we're going so we can be aligned in that way. And then of course there are natural times where we're meeting a company and maybe we realize this actually could be a better fit as a corporate development conversation, and we can sort of like make the introduction to the other side of the team. But we are very careful of not sharing information and data. I think it's super, super important to be upfront with founders and like be really protective of the information and the trust that they're giving us as investors. So if there is like interest from product leaders or from the M&A team, I will often really try to just connect them directly versus trying to sort of like be a coordinator or sharing information behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's a big thing that founders are always concerned about, data leaking back to the organization that's, couldn't be potentially used to be building competitors. One of our companies recently told us that like they partnered with Snowflake, and then Snowflake was actually building a similar product inside their marketplace. So like there are stories about this that founders get nervous about. Yeah. But I think you just got to be upfront and transparent, which it sounds like you guys are very much focused on.
That's right. I mean, in terms of like the building products, like that's a tough thing to avoid, especially in a platform and a size of HubSpot. So I think it really comes down to being transparent and upfront with entrepreneurs, especially if we're doing it at seed stage. Like they're going to change a lot over the years, and HubSpot will too. So it's kind of just like, I'm going to be on your side. I'm going to share what I can, and I'm going to protect information and try to help you, guide you as much as possible. But I cannot, promise that we're not going to be building similar products in the future. And so in often cases, we're actually doing that already, and founders are aware of that. You mentioned Salesforce investing in us. I mean, we were already competing in ways at that time. So I think it's a good example of like, as long as there's understanding on both sides of what that means and having like, mature people around the table, you can make it work.
Yeah. I think like as a VC fund, we obviously try to not invest in competitive apps or products. And we try to get the founders to connect before we invest. Yeah. But at the speed at which tools are being built now, the product overlaps that are happening because everything's going horizontal in terms of their usage and applications is just super hard to predict. And so you're right. You're going to see a lot of overlap, probably what you're building internally at HubSpot with your team versus some of the tools that you invest in today. And 18, 24 months from now, they're already merging into where you guys have been building for the last 12 months as well. Yeah. But nobody knew about it.
Right. So I think it's just all about honesty, being direct, and sharing what we can with our portfolio companies. And before we get into, I'd love to hear, like, so you guys are investing at the earliest stage too. Like, what are you looking for? What are you seeing that's getting you excited when you're meeting a team?
Look, I mean, the thing that we always tell people at our stage is we're investing pre-incorporation, right? We're investing in two things, people and problems. That's it. Because the product will come after that. The right product will come after that. And we don't want to be guided by some type of like early revenue traction by some random enterprise that's paying it really as a dev shop, you know? So for us, we're really trying to understand what is the problem here? And is it truly differentiated enough for the AI space to be able to build a solution for it? So we're investing in like, 911, 311, call center automation systems. We're investing in, government transcription services for like lobbyists and government relations firms, pharmacy AI, agents, AI infrastructure tools to help people take some of this like disparate data systems and bring it all into their existing applications. We're building obviously like fintech tools to help with compliance and KYC and AML compliance for some of these smaller, community or sponsor banks that don't have the access to some of the tools that like a JP Morgan does when they can build all this stuff inside. So we really start with that, the problem, and do the people building or want to build a solution have the domain expertise, like you said, to do it. And then we start thinking how the product can evolve. I think the hardest thing too, though, is there's a lot of misguided signals coming out from rapid traction, that experimental ARRs we talk about, that is not sustainable for what a venture fund typically has to bet on, which is like a 10-year journey. And a lot of these companies are going to have significant churn, unfortunately, 2 years from now. And we need to be very careful of that because there's a lot of mixed signals. Yes, we invest early and there's a company that comes around and all of a sudden they're at $100 million valuation just because the next investor wanted to put in 10 million. And that's just the way it worked on the math, on the cap table. Those are not signals that we like to just only focus on.
It sounds like you're more focused on some of these vertical applications
for
as
sure.
well.
100%.
Yeah.
Vertical to start, wedge vertical to start, but we love also when they can be applied horizontally. But that's not what we underwrite for. It's almost like a byproduct of the fact that they nailed one vertical and then they moved on to the horizontal side. Adam, I love chatting with you, but I want to make sure we have time for the fast favorites. So first off, your favorite podcast.
I'm going to give two here. Big basketball fan, big NBA fan. And there's a podcast called The Greatest of All Talk. It's actually in the Stratechery like bundle if you like Ben Thompson. I've loved that and listened to it religiously. And then two, more recently, No Priors from Elad and Sarah Guo is
amazing.
Good AI podcast, yeah.
And the HubSpot group has their own podcast network, right?
They do, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it was another good sort of foresight. I think partly driven by Dharmesh that content is going to be more and more of a differentiator, especially as like AI search and like inbound, SEO kind of goes away. So, we've got some great independent creators that are still doing their thing. And like The Hustle, as you mentioned, Mindstream is another one. And we don't influence their, content, or we sometimes will suggest guests and stuff, but it's really a way to have some reach on the advertising, but as well as just like build fans and awareness long-term through creators.
Yeah, it's amazing. You've got obviously like My First Million is a big one that people probably in our space. I'm still waiting for the call to be invited to join the podcast network of HubSpot. Right. So maybe you can put in a good word.
Yeah, we'll make that happen.
Yeah. Next is your favorite newsletter or blog?
I think I think Stratechery still has been like the longest running for me, and I've never stopped missing a day on that one.
Definitely a classic here on the pod. Next is your favorite tech gadget.
Ooh. Recently, we got the 8 Sleep has transformed sleep for me and my wife. We were always so hot. It was terrible.
Can you call my wife and tell her I've been begging for it? Tell me how it works.
She gave me so much crap for, she's like, oh, another tech thing.
Yeah.
She loves it. She's so happy we got it. So you just got to tell her maybe or just do it and she won't regret it.
And do you have the full mattress or the cover?
Just the cover.
The cover. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm sold already. Next is your favorite new trend.
Kind of back to what we took. I've been so fascinated with how we can apply AI to learning for kids. And I've been doing a lot of that at home with my children. And I can't wait to see what people can create.
Apps, websites, give me some tips.
I've been building stuff with Vappy, actually, like voice agents to like help them create stories on the fly. I made a 20 questions game doing like creative sort of like imaginative play with AI.
Back to the gamification of math is still in your heart. I love that. And next is your favorite book.
Lord of the Rings.
What's that?
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, any which one?
I think Return of the King. Favorite.
Really? Do you read it often still?
No, I haven't read it. Reread it. People keep telling me I need to reread it, and I think I will soon.
That's fantastic. And last but not least is your favorite life lesson.
I think, just where we started the conversation, I think that when I got to see many years of parents, their parenting style and their kids, sort of understanding that like the most important things there are not giving kids what they want mostly, and teaching them to be resilient. I feel like those are like the most important lessons that I've really took away from that whole chapter of my life that I'm really trying to apply as a parent now. And it's so challenging, like they're always trying to get one more thing and get you to kind of give in. And I think holding that line ultimately is the most important thing to creating strong adults. And that's the thing I've taken through my life.
That's fantastic advice. I'm going to tell my wife about that one tonight when we put the kids to bed. Well, thanks for joining us in the tank today with Adam Coccari, Managing Director of HubSpot Ventures.
Thank you. So great to see you. And I can't wait to see you in a month or two in Vancouver.
Absolutely.